In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The world was dark and formless, and the Spirit of God moved over the waters. Then, in an act of divine power, God spoke. "Let there be light," he said, and instantly light shattered the darkness, dividing day from night. The light was not just physical, it was the very essence of God's presence. The world was being born. As the days passed, each moment of creation flowed with divine intention. The second day brought forth the sky, stretching vast and infinite above the earth, separating the waters below from the waters above. The third day saw the land emerge from the waters, forming dry ground. Mountains and valleys appeared, rivers flowed, and the seas were gathered. Trees bearing fruit and grasses rotted from the earth. Everything had its place, and every creation bore witness of the artistry and majesty of God. On the fourth day, lights, the sun, moon, and stars were placed in the sky to govern day and night and to mark seasons and time. On the fifth day, the earth was filled with living creatures, birds in the air, fish in the seas, each one unique and designed by God's hand. But it was the sixth day that marked the pinnacle of creation. Mankind, created in God's own image, was placed at the top of the created order. God formed Adam from the dust of the earth, shaping him with purpose, breathing into his nostrils the breath of life. Adam became a living soul. In a lush garden called Eden, Adam was placed to work and care for the land. The garden was a paradise, a perfect world where nature flourished and the air was rich with the scent of blooming flowers and fruits. But something was still missing. God, in his wisdom, said, "It is not good for man to be alone." So, he caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep and took one of his ribs. From that rib, God created Eve, a companion for Adam, equal in dignity, yet uniquely different. The first marriage was established as Adam declared, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." God then looked upon his creation, and all was very good. On the seventh day, God rested, not from weariness, but from completing his perfect creation, instituting that Sabbath as a day of rest and blessing. But little did Adam and Eve know, the tranquility of Eden would soon be disrupted by the serpents. The serpent creature was more cunning than any other in the garden. The serpent's voice was smooth and seductive. Did God really say, "You shall not eat from any tree in the garden"? The question was planted in Eve's mind, causing doubt. The serpent slyly twisted God's command, implying that God was withholding something good from them. Eve, looking at the tree of knowledge, saw that the fruit was pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom. It promised to make her like God. So, she took the fruit and ate, and gave some to Adam who was with her. The moment they ate, their eyes were opened. They knew good and evil, and for the first time they realized they were naked. Shame and guilt flooded their hearts, and they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. Their perfect world, now shattered, left them exposed before one another and before God. As evening fell, God walked in the garden, calling out, "Where are you?" Adam and Eve, hiding among the trees, trembled. "We were afraid because we were naked, so we hid." God asked, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat?" Adam, feeling the weight of his sin, responded, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the fruit, and I ate." Eve, now caught in a web of blame, said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." God turned to the serpent, condemning it to crawl in its belly and eat dust for the rest of its days. But then, he gave a promise, the first gospel, future hope. "I will enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." This was a prophetic promise of the coming Savior who would defeat Satan. To Eve, God also declared that her pain in childbirth would be greatly increased, and her desire would be for her husband, who would rule over her. To Adam, God said the ground would be cursed, and he would toil and labor to eat from it. Both were expelled from the garden, to till the earth from which they were taken. Cherubim with a flaming sword were placed at the east of the garden, guarding the way to the tree of life. Paradise was lost, and humanity's future would be filled with suffering, toil, and separation from God. Adam and Eve became the parents of two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, the older brother, worked the soil, while Abel took care of the sheep. Both offered sacrifices to God. Cain offering the fruit of his crops, Abel offering the best of his flock. God accepted Abel's offering, but he rejected Cain's. Why? It wasn't the gift itself, but the heart behind it. Abel offered his sacrifice in faith, with sincerity, while Cain's offering was less than his best, and his heart was filled with resentments. Cain's jealousy burned like a fire, and in a fit of rage, he lured Abel into the field and struck him down. The first murder in history. When God asked Cain where his brother was, Cain responded, "Am I my brother's keeper?" God, knowing all, confronted Cain. "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." God then pronounced a curse on Cain, making the earth unfruitful for him. He marked Cain with a protective sign to prevent anyone from killing him, and Cain wandered away to the land of Nod, east of Eden, where he built a city. This was the beginning of humanity's departure from God's grace, as the line of Cain became marked by violence and pride. In contrast to Cain's line, Adam's descendants through Seth were recorded, and these names carried a different tone. The generations stretched through the ages until the birth of Noah, a man described as righteous in the sight of God, who would bring relief from the curse of sin. By Noah's time, humanity had grown increasingly corrupt. God saw that every thought of man was evil continually, and his heart was grieved. God's judgment was clear. He would send a flood to destroy all life on earth, sparing only Noah and his family who were righteous in his sight. God also instructed Noah to build a massive ark, large enough to house his family and pairs of every animal species. The ark was made of gopher wood, covered with pitch to make it waterproof. Noah worked tirelessly for years, preaching righteousness to a world that refused to listen. The floodwaters came suddenly. Torrential rain fell from the heavens, and the earth opened up, releasing waters from beneath. The waters rose, and everything that breathed outside the ark perished. Noah and his family, safe within the ark, watched as the world was undone. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain fell without stopping, and the waters covered the earth. Finally, the rain ceased, and the waters began to recede. Noah sent out a raven, then a dove to see if the earth was dry. When the dove returned with an olive leaf, Noah knew that life would soon be restored. After months of waiting, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat. God commanded Noah to leave the ark. And as a sign of thanks, Noah offered sacrifices to God. God's heart was pleased, and he made a covenant with Noah, promising never again to destroy the earth by flood. The rainbow became a sign of that covenant, a reminder of God's mercy and faithfulness to his creation. After the floodwaters receded and the earth was repopulated, Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the fathers of new nations. As humanity multiplied, they came together in the plain of Shinar and decided to build a tower that reached the heavens. They sought to make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered across the earth. The construction of the Tower of Babel was a symbol of human pride, a desire to reach up to the divine and make themselves like gods. The tower's base was wide and its height unimaginable, workers toiling day and night, their hopes pinned on the idea that by building something so grand, they could overcome their limitations. But God saw their intentions, and in his wisdom decided to thwart their plans. Confounded by the creation of so many languages, the workers could no longer understand each other. The tower was abandoned, its purpose undone. Babel, meaning confusion, became a lasting reminder of mankind's pride and God's sovereign power. The genealogy of Shem, leading to Abram, later known as Abraham, highlights the faithfulness of those who kept the knowledge of the one true God alive. One day in the quiet of Ur, in modern-day Iraq, Abram received the divine call. God spoke to him, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." For Abram, a man in his prime, accustomed to his family's wealth and heritage, this was a monumental request. But Abram's heart stirred with trust, and he obeyed. He took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot and his servants, and they set on a journey of faith. Abram knew neither the land nor what lay ahead, but God had promised to make him into a great nation. They traveled to Canaan, where God appeared again, saying, "To your offspring I will give this land." There, Abram built an altar to the Lord, marking the beginning of his new life and his role as the father of a new people. Abram's journey brought him prosperity, but soon his wealth created tension between him and Lot's herders. The land couldn't support both their flocks. Abram the elder generously offered Lot the first choice of land. Lot, looking to the fertile plains near Sodom, chose the better land, leaving Abram with the less desirable territory. Despite Lot's decision, God reassured Abram, "Look as far as you can see to the north, south, east, and west, and all of it I will give to you and your descendants forever." Abram, in faith, accepted his lot, and he camped near Hebron, where he built another altar to God. Lot, living in the land of Sodom, was soon caught up in a war between kings. His city was captured, and he was taken prisoner. Abram, hearing of his nephew's plight, gathered a small army and pursued the captors. In a daring battle, Abram defeated the kings and rescued Lot. Afterward, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, later to be known as Jerusalem, met Abram and blessed him, offering bread and wine. Abram gave him a tenth of the spoils, recognizing him as a priest of the Most High God. As Abram stood alone, contemplating his future, God appeared to him in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." Yet Abram's heart was troubled. He had no heir to inherit his promises. So in response, God promised that Abram would have a son from his own body, and his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. Despite God's promise, Sarai remained barren, and years passed without the birth of a child. She, in desperation, offered her servant Hagar to Abram, and Hagar bore him a son, Ishmael. Yet this decision caused tension in the household. Sarai, jealous of Hagar's pregnancy, mistreated her. Hagar then fled into the wilderness, but an angel of the Lord appeared, telling her to return and submit to Sarai's authority. The angel also promised that Ishmael would become a father of a great nation. When Abram was 99 years old, God appeared to him again and instituted the covenant of circumcision as a sign of his promise. God changed Abram's name to Abraham, father of many nations, and Sarai's name to Sarah. He promised that Sarah would bear a son, Isaac, and through him the covenant would be established. One day, while sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of day, Abraham saw 3 men approaching. They were divine visitors, angels. Though Abraham did not know it at first, he invited them to rest and prepared a feast for them. As they ate, one of the visitors revealed that Sarah would bear a son. At this, Sarah laughed, for she was well beyond childbearing age. But the visitor replied, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Sarah, though initially skeptical, eventually believed, and the promise was fulfilled in the birth of Isaac. As Abraham's guests prepared to leave, one of them, the Lord himself, revealed to Abraham that he was about to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their wickedness. Abraham, concerned for the righteous in those cities, bargained with God, asking, "Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked?" Eventually, God agreed to spare the cities if just 10 righteous people could be found. But not even 10 were found. God sent 2 angels to Lot who lived in Sodom. The angels urged Lot and his family to flee before the cities were destroyed by fire and brimstone, and also to not look back. But as they fled, Lot's wife did look back, and she turned immediately into a pillar of salt. The promise of Isaac was fulfilled, and Sarah, in her old age, gave birth to a son. Abraham named him Isaac, as God has commanded. On the day of Isaac's weaning, Sarah saw Ishmael mocking her son and demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Though it grieved him, Abraham obeyed God's command, and Hagar and Ishmael were sent into the wilderness. God, however, promised that Ishmael would become the father of a great nation, and he provided for them in the desert. Abraham's faith was tested when God commanded him to sacrifice Isaac. In obedience, Abraham took Isaac to the mountain, prepared an altar, and bound his son. Just as Abraham raised the knife to slay him, an angel of the Lord stopped him, saying, "Do not lay a hand on the boy." God then provided a ram as a substitute sacrifice. Abraham's faith was proved, and the angel reaffirmed that God will bless Abraham and his descendants. Sarah, who had once laughed at the promise of a child, lived to see it fulfilled, but the years of joy were not to last forever. When Sarah died at the age of 127, Abraham mourned deeply for her. He sought a burial site for her and purchased a cave at Machpelah, near Hebron, near the Hittites, ensuring that her memory would be honored. Abraham's purchase of the cave was not only a practical act, but a solemn declaration of his faith in God's promises. This land, though still occupied by others, would one day belong to his descendants. It was here that Abraham buried Sarah, and the cave became the first part of the promised land to be claimed by his family. As the years passed, however, Abraham's thoughts turned to finding a wife for Isaac, the child of promise. He called his trusted servant Eliezer and sent him to his homeland in Mesopotamia to find a wife for Isaac, from among the people who worshiped the one true God. Eliezer, a man of faith, prayed for God's guidance, asking that the right woman would be revealed by a simple sign. The woman who offered him water would also offer to water his camels. At the well outside the city of Nahor, Eliezer met Rebekah, the granddaughter of Abraham's brother Nahor. Rebekah, a young woman of kindness and beauty, offered him water and, without hesitation, also watered his camels. Eliezer knew immediately that this was the woman God had chosen for Isaac. Rebekah's family agreed, and she left her home to journey to Canaan to marry Isaac. Their meeting was one of divine providence. Isaac and Rebekah's marriage would not only fulfill Abraham's desire for a godly heir, but would also set the stage for the continuation of God's covenant promise. Abraham, the father of many nations, lived to see his son Isaac thrive and his legacy take root. When Abraham died at the age of 175, Isaac inherited the covenant promise and the land of Canaan. But even as Abraham's life came to a peaceful end, his family continued to wrestle with the fulfillment of God's plans. Isaac's wife, Rebekah, would bear him 2 sons, but even before they were born, they struggled within her womb. Esau and Jacob, the twins, fought as rivals from the very beginning. Esau, the firstborn, was red and covered with hair. His impulsive, wild nature reflected his strong, rugged character. He was a hunter and a man of the field, strong in body and spirit, but often quick-tempered and careless. Jacob, the younger brother, was smooth-skinned and dwelled in the tents. He was a quiet, thoughtful man who, though not as physically imposing as Esau, was cunning and resourceful. From the very beginning, their rivalry took roots. One day, Esau returned from the field famished, and Jacob saw an opportunity. Esau, hungry from his hunt, begged for some of the stew Jacob was preparing. Jacob, always calculating, seized the moment and demanded Esau's birthright, the rightful inheritance of the firstborn, in exchange for a bowl of stew. Esau, driven by his immediate hunger and carelessness, agreed, trading his future for a meal. In that moment, the birthright, the spiritual and material blessing reserved for the firstborn, was lost. As time passed, Isaac grew old and blind. His eyesight failed, and it was near the end of his life when he called for Esau to receive his blessing. The blessing of the firstborn was a sacred act, a passing of the mantle from father to son, a moment filled with emotion and tradition. But Rebekah, overhearing the conversation, decided to deceive her husband in favor of her beloved son Jacob. Jacob, though hesitant, was persuaded by his mother. With her help, he dressed in Esau's clothes, put goatskins on his hands and neck to mimic Esau's rough skin, and went to Isaac with the stolen blessing. Isaac, though suspicious, was convinced by the feeling of Jacob's hands and the scent of Esau's clothes. Isaac then blessed Jacob, unknowingly giving him the birthright and the covenant promise. When Esau returned and discovered the deception, he was furious. "Bless me too, father," he cried. But it was too late. Isaac's blessing could not be reversed, and Esau's fury turned into a desire for vengeance. To escape his brother's wrath, Jacob fled to Haran, leaving his family behind and beginning a journey of exile. On his way to Haran, Jacob stopped for a night at a place that would later become known as Bethel. As he lay on the ground, a stone for his pillow, Jacob had a dream, a vision of a ladder reaching from earth to heaven with angels ascending and descending. At the top, God said, "I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring." Jacob awoke from his dream, filled with awe, and exclaimed, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." He took the stone he had used as a pillow, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on it. He named the place Bethel, meaning the house of God. This moment marked a significant turning point for Jacob, a moment when the promise of Abraham and Isaac became his own. Jacob arrived in Haran and met his cousin Rachel at the well. She was beautiful and kind, and Jacob fell in love with her immediately. He agreed to work for her father Laban for 7 years to earn her hand in marriage. But on the night of the wedding, Laban, deceitful like Jacob, tricked him. He gave him Leah, the older sister, instead of Rachel. Jacob, furious at the deception, agreed to work another 7 years to marry Rachel as well. Leah, unloved but fertile, bore Jacob many sons. Rachel, who was loved by Jacob, was barren and became envious. She gave her midsummer in Bilhah to Jacob to bear children on her behalf. Then Leah, not to be outdone, gave her maidservant Zilpah to Jacob, and she bore Gad and Asher. Finally, God opened Rachel's womb, and she gave birth to Joseph, the son whom Jacob loved dearly. Later, Rachel would also bear Benjamin, but she died during childbirth. After many years in Haran, Jacob decided to return to Canaan. As he journeyed back, he feared the confrontation with his brother Esau. The memory of Esau's anger and his own deception weighed heavily on Jacob's heart. One night at the Jabbok River, Jacob was left alone and a mysterious figure appeared. It was a man, God himself, in a form that Jacob did not recognize. They wrestled through the night, neither side able to gain the upper hand. As dawn broke, the man touched Jacob's hip, dislocating it. But Jacob refused to let go, saying, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." In that moment, God changed Jacob's name to Israel, meaning he who struggles with God. He had wrestled with God and with men, and he had prevailed. Jacob, now Israel, had faced his fears, reconciled with God, and was forever changed. God blessed him, and from that moment on, Jacob walked with a limp, a reminder of the night he wrestled with God. When Jacob finally met Esau, he was prepared for the worst. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him. The two brothers wept as they were reconciled. Jacob, forever humbled by his past actions, offered Esau gifts, but Esau refused. "I have enough, brother," he said. The reconciliation marked a pivotal moment in the story of Jacob, and the brothers went their separate ways in peace. But the family of Jacob was far from peaceful. Dinah, Jacob's only daughter, went out to visit the women of the land, as she caught the eye of Shechem, the son of the city's ruler, Hamor. Shechem took her and violated her. The act was a deep dishonor, not only to Dinah, but to her entire family. Shechem, realizing his wrong, desired to marry Dinah, and he offered to make things right by paying a bride price. However, Dinah's brothers, particularly Simeon and Levi, were furious. They saw their sister's defilement as an offense not only to their family, but to God. They deceived Shechem and his father Hamor by telling them they would agree to the marriage if Shechem and all the men of the city would be circumcised. The men of the city, eager to unite with Jacob's family, agreed. However, on the third day after the circumcision, when the men were in pain and vulnerable, Simeon and Levi attacked the city, killing every male. They plundered the city and took the women and children as captives. This violent act weighed heavily on Jacob, who feared that it would bring retribution from surrounding nations. Jacob, now deeply troubled by the violence of his sons, was called by God to move once again, this time to Bethel. It was there that God reaffirmed his covenant with Jacob and reminded him that his name was now Israel, a name that signified both his struggles and his triumphs. Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel, was his father's favorite. Jacob's love for him was evident to all, especially because Joseph was the son of his beloved Rachel. Jacob made Joseph a special coat of many colors, a gift that symbolized his unique status within the family. But his brothers, already resentful of the favoritism shown to him, despised him even more. Joseph's youth was marked by a naivety, believing his brothers when they asked him about his strange dreams. But one dream in particular infuriated them. In it, Joseph saw himself and his brothers binding sheaves of grain. His sheaf stood upright, while theirs bowed down to it. He shared the dream, and his brothers grew even more enraged, saying, "Will you indeed reign over us? Will you indeed have dominion over us?" Their jealousy festered. Joseph then had another dream, where the sun, moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to him. He told his father and his brothers, and even his father rebuked him. "Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" But Jacob, though troubled, kept the matter in his mind. The brothers, unable to contain their bitterness, decided to act on their jealousy when Joseph came to them one day in the field. They threw him into a pit, planning to leave him there to die. But instead, they sold him to a caravan heading to Egypt. They dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood and showed it to Jacob, leading him to believe that his beloved son had been killed by a wild animal. Joseph was sold into Potiphar's house, the captain of Pharaoh's guard in Egypt. Despite his circumstances, Joseph prospered in Potiphar's house. Potiphar saw that God was with Joseph and made him overseer of his household. Potiphar's wife desired Joseph, but when he refused her advances, Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph of trying to seduce her. Potiphar, enraged, had Joseph thrown into prison. Even in prison, though, Joseph found favor with the chief jailer. His ability to interpret dreams, a gift from God, soon became known. Two men, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, were in prison with Joseph, and each had troubling dreams. Joseph interpreted their dreams. The cupbearer would be restored to his position, and the baker would be executed. Both of Joseph's interpretations came true. But 2 years later, when Pharaoh himself had a troubling dream, a dream of 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 skinny cows, and 7 healthy ears of grain being swallowed by 7 withered ears of grain, none of Pharaoh's wise men could interpret the dream. But the cupbearer remembered Joseph, and he was brought before Pharaoh. Joseph, with the wisdom of God, interpreted Pharaoh's dream. There would be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Pharaoh, impressed by Joseph's wisdom, made him second in command over all of Egypt, tasked with preparing for the coming famine. When the famine struck, it reached far beyond Egypt. Jacob, hearing that there was grain in Egypt, sent his sons to buy food. Unknown to them, they stood before Joseph, their long-lost brother, now a powerful ruler in Egypt. Joseph recognized him immediately, but did not reveal his identity. He then accused them of being spies, and after testing their honesty by keeping one brother, Simeon, in prison and sending the others back to bring Benjamin, Jacob's youngest son, Joseph finally revealed himself. "I am Joseph, your brother who you sold into Egypt." His brothers, terrified, could not believe it, but Joseph, showing grace, forgave them. He told them, "Do not be angry for yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Joseph invited his family to live in Goshen, a fertile region in Egypt, and provided for them during the remaining years of the famine. As years passed, Jacob grew old and asked his sons to bring him together so he could bless them. He spoke prophetic words over each of them, declaring the future of the 12 tribes of Israel. To Judah, he promised that the ruler's scepter would not depart from his descendants, a prophecy that would find its fulfillment in the line of King David and ultimately in Jesus Christ. When Jacob died, he was mourned by his sons. They took him back to Canaan and buried him in the cave of Machpelah, beside his beloved Sarah. After their father's death, Joseph's brothers feared that Joseph might still seek revenge for the wrongs they had done to him. But Joseph reassured them, saying, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph forgave them, and the family lived in Egypt for many years, prospering under Joseph's care. Joseph lived out his days in Egypt, guiding his family to the nation of wisdom. Before his death, he gathered his brothers and said, "God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When that time comes, carry my bones with you." His words pointed forward to a deliverance yet to come, a reminder that no matter how long they take to unfold, God's promises never fail.